When CFMOTO announced the 450MT, people were ecstatic that it was coming with fully adjustable suspension. I mean, in this price range, that's practically unheard of, let alone from KYB. And one of the great things is the suspension isn't soft and mushy. However, it's certainly not perfect, and that's why I'm here at RideDynamics, a motorcycle suspension specialist. Today, I'm going to get the suspension set up for my weight and riding ability, and we're going to do a deep dive into the suspension on the 450MT. I'm here with the owner of RideDynamics, Joe Salter. How you going, Joe?
Good, yourself?
Yeah, good. Mate, would you better just introduce yourself and tell us about what you do here at RideDynamics?
Sure. So my name's Joe Salter, well known in the road racing circles more than anything else, but I do a lot of suspension for all different motorcycles, be it adventure, off-road, racing, road, doesn't matter. Anything two wheels with suspension I'll do, even some mountain bikes at times.
Okay.
So we've been doing suspension here, and that's all we do here for the last 8 years. That's what we specialise in. And so yeah, I've become the person that solves problems for many people. Most workshops and bike shops send me bits and pieces across the country.
Yep.
And yeah, so I've got a massive range of experience and knowledge to draw back from doing thousands of bikes so far. So that's basically how we are here.
Yep. Just wait for the truck to go past, of course. Always the way. Mate, obviously we're here today doing the 450MT.
Yep.
I'm going to put myself out on the line here and kind of tell you my thoughts so
Sure.
far of the suspension. And just correct me if I'm wrong at the end, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
So far, I find the front's a little bit busy. I'm not sure if that's because it's too soft. I think it probably is, and it's going too far down the stroke.
Yep.
Feels like it's kind of transitioning, so it feels busy. So when I'm riding on like rough terrain and rocks and stuff like that, it's a bit all over the place and reactive. The shock, I'm finding it's okay, but it feels a little bit dead. Like it's just not much feel there for me. On bigger hits and faster riding, I am bottoming out. Most certainly the front. I can hear it bang and clatter. But honestly, it's much better than I thought it would be. And on small erosion band jumps and that, it feels great. It feels really good. But honestly, it is holding me back, the suspension. Like I feel like I have to slow down. A lot of the time. And on bigger hits, it feels like it kicks me in the ass. It's like it's rebounding or something, just kicked me in the ass. Tell me if I'm wrong or what you were finding so far, the ones you worked on.
No problem. So you are fairly well accurate in your comments. The front is too soft, both in spring rate and also dampening. So there's a lot of action going on. Like you said, it's busy. So if there's a lack of rebound control, it wants to unload the front tyre too quickly after bumps. And so that translates into loss of traction or deflection. But also the spring rate's quite soft, so you tend to be too far into the stroke too often. So then what happens is the tyre has to do too much work. Instead of the suspension doing the job, the tyre's having to do this instead. And then it takes away grip. If the tyre's doing suspension, it's no longer gripping the ground. So that's why it moves around a lot more. And in the rear, the dead feeling you're coming across is there's an excess of high-speed rebound. So essentially, if we use a lot of travel, when it comes out of there, it doesn't come out quick enough. But then at the top of the stroke, it's not enough low-speed rebound. So the thing tends to buck and float. And so you get the worst of both worlds there. Dead feeling to the back end, but then it feels like it bucks you on bumps and stuff.
It definitely, going over like erosion bands, big hits, it's like, it feels like it's shooting you forward and kicking the ass, and then you're losing balance. And a lot of time, like, man, I'm not Toby Price, or I should say Daniel Sanders now, or something like that. But I go okay, and I'm like, surely this isn't me. Well, that makes me feel a bit better about myself. Yeah,
for sure. You're pretty well accurate in your comments with the bike. The rear shock also displays the complete lack of compression dampening. So when you do the erosion mounds and you come down from them, you tend to blow through too much stroke too quickly. And so then there's a lot of stored energy going on, and then it tries to unload and get you out of the hole. So what we'll do today is we'll aim to address all these things and bring that dampening balance back, so your compression's up and your rebound's sort of coming back a bit as well.
I suppose what I want to know and other people want to know is, can we fix those problems?
We can address them a long way, yes.
A long way.
they're still standard componentries, and so the tolerances are not as fine as what you have with aftermarket, but they also cost a hell of a lot more to go aftermarket options.
Yep.
So this will cure 95% of the problem. In terms of the fine adjustments and fine nuances of it all, that's where aftermarket comes into it, and that's the difference between the two.
Yep.
So what we're working with today is reworking the standard componentry. The plan is to put some heavier fork springs in to suit your weight and what you're doing. The rear spring, surprisingly enough, is really good for a person of your weight and what you're doing with the bike.
Yep. Okay.
So the rear will be concentrating on getting the damping to work. And so that bottoming on the erosion mounds, on the jumps, landing, will slow the compression damping down, so it doesn't go just bottom of stroke. It comes down like this.
Okay.
And so that's a
smoother
wholesale change.
Transition.
Yeah, that's a wholesale change, and that's something we can easily achieve with reworking standard stuff.
Yep.
When you want to do that and keep your real small cherry bump sensitivities, that's where aftermarket stuff takes over.
Yeah. It's just not physically going to happen with the suspensions on the bike.
It'll be a hell of a lot better, like a hell of a lot better.
Okay.
But there's always room for improvement, no matter what we do. So yeah.
Okay. A lot of people, they're pretty skeptical about CFMOTO.
Sure.
A lot of it is because it's a Chinese brand.
Yeah.
And they're kind of questioning the KYB suspension that's put on it. How are you finding the quality of the components that are on it, both the fork and shock?
Yep. So I'll start with the shock. The rear shock is a 40-14 shock, which is found in 90% of Japanese sports bikes. Some adventure bikes like Tenere's run a 40-14. Same as a Tenere and a Touareg. In terms of piston dimensions and rods and stuff,
I was going to say, what?
yeah, but it runs a similar bladder. All these things, they're very much Japanese quality componentry. They're not made on the cheap.
Yep.
What they have chosen to do, though, is one, you don't get a compression adjuster, so it takes a bit of money out of the system. But also the piston is about a 10-year-old design piston. So it's a little bit older design.
Yep.
That's not a bad thing. The piston ports and shapes are all good. They work well. So it's just they're using a bit of old tech that's been proven and very well regarded as reliable and using it. And that's how they save their money.
Okay.
At the forks, the fork internals are the basic entry-level KYB. It's very much what you find across most Japanese bikes in that 15 grand window. So MTA 9s, Yamahas, things like that, they very similar fork cartridge internals, same piston materials, etc. Piston designs are very similar.
Yep.
So it's not cheap stuff. It's not nasty, definitely not. It's all made properly and made well, but it's probably about a 10-year-old technology line. Yep. Which, in my opinion, isn't the worst thing, because that's when suspension as OEM came out of the box was good.
Yeah. Okay. So what are we looking at doing today?
Right, so we're going to put some new fork springs in to help address the soft front end. The standard fork springs are progressive, and so the initial part of the travel is quite soft, and then it ramps up to a harder rate, but unfortunately it doesn't get hard enough still. Okay. Progressive springs are a bit of a myth.
Yeah, I'm not sold, but
so they
tell me if you want to. Don't get me wrong.
No, it's fine. The only time I find them of any purpose or application is cruisers, where the front wheel's all the way over there, and you need a bit of sensitivity at the start of the stroke for chatter on the ground.
Right. Okay.
Any other time, they're too soft and then ramp up too hard.
Right.
So they don't really apply to anything else, in my opinion, anyway. I much prefer to run a linear spring, because also forks are progressive in nature themselves. We run an air gap in them. Yep. And as that air gap reduces as you compress the fork gets stiffer. So you can tune that bottoming resistance, changing the air gap. Yep. Raising the oil level, it bottoms less. Okay. Drop the oil level, it bottoms easier. So progressive springs are a waste of time for most bikes. Yep. So the front will be a new set of linear springs to suit, and then we're going to revalve the rebound and compression piston assemblies to increase their dampening and calm that front end down. Yep. Stop it deflecting off things and generally follow the terrain much better. Yep. The back end, the rear spring is actually suitable for you, so there's no point changing that out. But we will pull apart and we'll revalve the piston to give it some proper damping. There is almost no compression dampening in shock whatsoever. Yep. So that's the plan.
Well, that's good to hear about the rear. I thought I had to put a harder spring in the back.
Yeah. No, it's actually quite firm. They're a 97 Newton spring, which is good for about a 95 kilo rider. Yep. With 0 to 10 kilo luggage, basically. Yeah.
So what kind of weight range should people look at changing the springs on this bike?
Front fork spring's generally about a 75 kilo rider. Anything above that, they start to get a bit soft, particularly if you're going to go off-road in water bars and get the thing off the ground. The back end, the rear spring, like I said, it's good, suitable weight for about a 90 kilo rider to 100 kilo, that sort of window. So if you're outside them weights, change of springs is half the battle, one, and good suspension. You know, so if you're lighter spring makes it more comfortable, more traction, win-win. If you're heavier, heavier spring stops at bottoming, using too much travel. So it's important to get your spring rate right and your sag settings right.
Mate, what kind of price are we looking at for the work we're doing today? I'm trying to do like a budget build, but I also know that setting up suspension is just like you're mad if you don't do it.
Correct.
On most bikes.
So our general we have a standardised pricing structure basically here. A respring and revalve for a bike like this is usually around $1,100, $1,200 window. That's new springs front and back. Any valving changes required as well. These things are not designed to come apart. They've got peening on everything, so we have to get rid of that, readdress threads. So it's a little bit of time involved. And then any time after that, when you're revalving the same componentry again, that's not required, we just pop it all apart. So you save a bit of money at that point. So the initial part's always a bit dearer than future ones. But yeah, so generally it's around $1,100 to $1,200 for a respring revalve front and back, right in, right out. If you start looking at rebuilds, seals and stuff are additional on top. The labour is the same.
Mate, how good is suspension going to be once it's all done? Like, I'm going to be doing motocross jumps and then still got a nice plush feeling, or is it going to be...
That's the aim.
No, I mean, that would be amazing, but I know that's probably not realistic for the price. How good can I expect it to be? Don't get me wrong, I'm going to be testing it, guys. I just want to know from a professional's opinion how good it will be potentially.
So we always aim to, on a basic revalve respring on a standard componentry, at least a 70% improvement over what it was standard. You know, we can't ever make it dialed because the componentry doesn't allow us to do so. It's just how it works. And there's no magic bullet when it comes to suspension. There's no such thing as suspension that can do motocross and handle the forces and be plush and compliant on the highway. They're two different worlds. Until we start seeing magnetic adjustable suspension, we won't get that for a long time.
That sounds cool.
It'd be cool, but they're too big and heavy and very expensive.
Okay. So let's say this is your entry level kind of thing that you recommend doing. How much more would someone have to spend to get cartridges and a rear shock?
Sure. So as I understand at the moment, rear shocks are not that commonly available yet. They're coming, and we're working on offering a custom unit for that sort of thing. And a rear shock would start off around $1,800 with a remote preload adjuster. And you could easily spend $3,500 depending on what kind of a performance you want out of it, basically.
A third of the bike for everyone?
Basically, right. So, so with the front end replacement fork cartridges, they can generally start off around $1,500 and go up from there. But generally I find the standard componentry, we can make it work well for a similar price point as that $1,500 mark. So you want to be spending more than that to find an actual proper gain or improvement of what we can do today. So when you factor in the fact that it's $1,500 minimum, $1,500 minimum, $3,000 to get aftermarket, you get a pretty solid result for $1,100 reworking the standard stuff.
A lot of people want me to compare this to the Himalayan 450, which I will be doing. I had that bike, I don't know, for a couple of months. And really rode the wheels off and got a good feel to it. Feel for it. How does this suspension compare to the Himalayan 450s?
Sure. It's pretty much chalk and cheese. This has cartridges in the front, like proper cartridges in the front, adjustability available. The Himalayan doesn't have adjustments on the top, I believe.
No, it's non-adjustable completely.
And from memory, it's a shower big piston design. And so the big piston design by nature is quite sloppy at low speed movements. So when I say low speed, I mean the suspension moving speed, not travel speed of you riding down the road. So grabbing the brake, grabbing on the throttle, that movement to the bike is a low speed movement. And so the Himalayan's control of that's negligent. There's not much there. And then they tend to be harsh, hitting big bumps. So if you run into something like a square edge rock, like a high speed movement with the suspension, it transfers straight to you. And that's by nature of the big piston design. So the fork's not much chalk compared to these. These have a proper cartridge, 20mm piston, 10mm rod. So they're much like a proper sports bike or an aftermarket cartridge design.
Yep.
Much better in terms of controlling both speeds. The rear shocks, the standard shock on the Himalayan is very budget. It's equivalent to what you find on most Lambs commuter bikes.
Yeah,
Cheapest you can get. And as a result, it gets hot very quickly, and performance fades very fast after that. And so then you tend to find it gets sloppy, bounces around a lot. It doesn't have much dampening, so you go straight to the bottom of the stroke. And when it does, there's not much return dampening for rebound. It tends to want to launch you out of the seat afterwards.
I found exactly that, and I've got footage of when I did it. Came over an erosion mount, and it felt like the whole bike just went whoa, and then it's like it almost jumped again off the ground. Yep. And then sent me in the bushes.
Yeah, well, that's a complete lack of rebound control right there.
Yeah.
So
shithouse. I don't like it at all.
it's a two-part thing though. Your compression affects the rebound, and rebound affects compression, but. If a bike has no compression dampening, it tends to go through the stroke really quickly. Yep. Now the rebound's got a lot of work to control, a big job to do. It's got to control all that stored energy. Yep. Otherwise, it just unloads. Yep. So you can have a plush bike, but if it has no rebound dampening, it becomes unstable at the same time, which is what you found.
Right. Okay. Mate, before we take the bike apart and do everything, are people able to ship parts to you if they're not in the Brisbane area? Certainly. Yeah, we do mail all the time. Stuff go to the Kimberleys, Tasmania, Perth, everything in between. Yeah, we quite often do stuff nationally, and we've even done stuff over to New Zealand. So basically the way it works is you send it in, and with a note in the box, your name, your number, email, all that contact stuff, your weight, what you're doing with the bike, just put it all that on a note. And then usually within 10 business days it ships back out again. And so if you want it quicker turnaround, you always give me a call and book it in, and then ship before the booking day, and it gets done that day. So then your downtime with the bike is minimal. So generally I need to know all that information, send it in, we just then send you an invoice, you pay, and then we send it back. It's really straightforward, quite quick and easy. Okay. Well, we're going to take the bike apart. Looking at it, looks like it's pretty easy to take apart this bike. Me working on the bike personally at home seems really easy to work on. So we'll take it apart. We're going to put the bike suspension on the dyno. We're not going to show numbers or anything like that because, you know, it's your job. Yeah, exactly. And you've done a lot of work on the bike. I think you also mentioned you have a shared database. With other people. On my own YouTube channel and occasionally on my Facebook page, you might see I've commented about the Oracle or the group of other suspension tuners. So it's a group of us. The Oracle's a bit of a joke name between us, but we work together. They're all prominent suspension tuners around the country. And Clive Ward from Motorcycle Biz, who's well known in the adventure bike circles and enduro stuff. Him and I share a lot of data between bikes. And so we've been backwards and forwards with this particular bike, the Touareg, or your KTM adventure bikes as well, the 701s, etc. The Husqvarna and the 901s, one of my favourites. But yeah, so we do a lot of data sharing, so we have a broad net to get information and make things accurate. Okay. All right, well, we'll start working on the bike, I suppose. Sure, let's lock in. Let's do it. Cool. Rear shock coming out. So we're just starting up the dyno to get a baseline on how the shock is performing.
I'll show you the basic numbers of the shock as it comes out of the bike. And this shock is pulling just on 6,000 newtons of force on rebound. And we're only pulling 760 newtons on compression. So for a bike of this size and the type of riding you do, I would expect this to at least cover around about over 3,500 newtons of force on rebound, but not anything above 4,000 or 5,000. Okay. So it's got a lot of high-speed rebound damping going at the moment. But then on the compression, we normally want to see at least double that of what it's pulling currently. So revalving the shock will allow us to change these curves and these force values to chase what we're looking for, basically. Just before we go any further, now this is just running the dyno. You can feel the body of that shock there, it's quite warm. That was literally 40 seconds of running. So the standard shock with that much restriction in its rebound would cook the oil something fierce and cook the shock up. So as you are going down a long trail and working the shock really hard, the dampening will vary up and down because of the heat fade issue that the shock would have. So getting this sorted out will improve the shock's reliability and its consistency as well. So how many Ks are on the shock?
Not even 700. Why's that?
And you've done pretty much mostly off-road?
Mostly off-road.
So you can start to see that even here and now, you're getting a bit of debris inside the shock. So these little things in here that are sort of bubbling on the seal head.
Yep.
So it's basically this bit here, ingesting some stuff, which is normal. That's part and parcel of using the bike off-road. It's a harsh, dirty environment.
Yep.
But it's also why it's a good reminder that you need to maintain these things. You're using the bike off-road often, 50, 100 hours, somewhere in there, you want to get that shock serviced.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously, the harder you give it a hard time, the shorter that interval gets.
Yeah.
A motocross bike's 6 hours for servicing. So the oil's still nice and clear at least, which means it hasn't broken down. I wouldn't imagine it would at 750 Ks.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no real issue with that.
You can see here the dirt and debris that Joe was talking about, even just after, it's not even 700 kilometres on the bike. So Joe's just drawn this little diagram to explain why it's basically ingesting dirt. Can you just do it again really quickly? Tell us why.
This is the shock body here, and it's full of oil. There's your piston and there's your seal underneath it. And these little points here is the rubber seal on the shaft of the shock. Now, under normal circumstances, there's pressure, gas pressure inside the shock body, pushing the piston down. Now, that pressure pushes on this little point, which pushes into the shaft to create a better seal. Now, this shock displays an excessive amount of rebound dampening. So as it's trying to extend quickly, it creates a vacuum in here.
Yep.
And now, with that vacuum, it's got to move. So it actually starts to pull these seals away from the shaft and bends them upwards. So if you've got any sort of debris on the shaft, there's a chance it can actually get sucked up into it. And then that's how it gets in the shock.
So is that every shock or just
No,
this one?
just mainly shocks that have a lot of rebound dampening.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
Which this one definitely seems to have.
Yeah. Now, this is also why fork seals leak often.
Okay.
When you're in a mud hole and you clutch it to lift it up out of the hole,
Yep.
you all crap around the bottom of the fork at that time. This same process happens, and that's how you end up with water and dirt and crap inside your forks. Is when this seal opens up under the vacuum, pulls the stuff in.
Yep. Okay.
Now, road riders always say, how can my seals go? First thing they do after roadworks is they pop a wheelie.
Oh yeah, and all the grime
And
and.
vacuum can happen. And there's crap on there from all the roadwork stuff that goes straight in. And if it gets caught in that seal on the way through, it cuts the seal.
Right.
And now your seal starts leaking.
Yep.
So now we've got to take this nut off here. Now the factory doesn't want you doing this. So they peen this over here, so if you try to take that off, just undoing it now, you end up ripping the end of the shaft off. Okay. And that shaft gets ripped off, and then the needle seat that allows your rebound adjustment is broken off too. So you've got to get rid of the peening in order for us to get this nut off. So it's a couple of stages. We use a special drill to get rid of this part, and we go over to the linear belt and taper it, and then rethread it, and then we're right to use it. Righto, so this is the valving. So when we say revalve, we're looking to change these shims. So these shims sit on top of the piston, like so, when it's moving. So this is the compression side. So it sits like that in the bike. And so when you compress the shock, it's going to travel up through the column of oil in the shock. So we'll go through these ports here and push this shim open like that and let the oil leak past here. Now how we arrange these shims will dictate how stiff or how soft the shock is, basically. So the more shims, the harder it is to open, means it's harder for the oil to get through, so it's a firmer riding shock. We can tailor these things to do many different things. So this current setting, and why I say they have no compression dampening is because it literally doesn't. There's your piston, there's one single shim, and then a clamp, which dictates how much this is going to bend around there.
Right.
And that's it. That's all there is. So the second that there's any force applied to the shock, this one's going to want to lift off straight away, create a leaking of fluids. So it's not really controlling the compression of the shock or the bike at all. So when we go to put this back together, we're going to put a whole lot more in here. And same with the rebound, there's only a couple here. Now these are quite thick and heavy. We're going to go to more shims but a thinner stack, so we get a bit more control and choice on what we're doing basically. So this is the after stack. You see there's a lot more compression shims going on here now. And there's more rebound shims too, but they're all thinner. So these are all quite thick, and these are quite thin. So we need more of them to have the same sort of support. So essentially we've gone for a lot more compression dampening because the core problem of the bike is it blows through stroke quickly into the bottom of the stroke all the time, and then it has to get out of there. So we rely on the rebound to get it up and out of there. But the standard system has too much rebound, so it ends up staying down and bogging down and getting choppy. And as Curtis says before about the dead feeling in the rear end, it's because the rebound is so restrictive, it's not allowing that tyre to follow the terrain properly. So you start to feel like you don't know what's going on with the rear tyre. Half the battle is to get the bike to ride in the middle of the suspension travel all the time as best as possible. So more compression support means the bike's not going to bottom as much, which means less required on the rebound, which allows us to open it up, allows us to have more traction and more feel.
Yep. So just quickly, that top for everyone,
this one
is
here,
how it was.
Yep.
So
and this one here is what we're doing now.
The bottom's what he's changing it to, so it's a huge change.
Yeah, that's right. So the dyno will tell us.
So we're vacuum bleeding the shock.
Goes. So this is going to suck all the air out of the shock.
Yep.
So this is what all these bubbles are rushing through are. That'll eventually calm down. Once it evacuates all the air out of the shock.
So here's the plot of the shock versus the original. Now it's been tweaked by Joe. What can you tell us here just quickly, Joe?
Sure. So the compression stack here has given us nearly double the compression force available to slow the shock's compression down. But the rebound here, we've got a bit of, looks like maybe a cavitation or a needle adjustment. So I'm going to change the needle here and see if this is tidy up or not. But the rebound, you can see it's drastically dropped off. So it'll get out of the hole better. It'll have more traction and more feeling to you, more comfort. So in a sense, we've achieved our targets, but it's now to double check the wave here, run it again and have an inspection.
Rear shock is done. Now it's time to move on to the forks. First one out. We're just onto the forks now, and I'll get Joe to explain what's happening because there's a fair bit going on here. Hey Joe, can you just tell us what you've done to the forks and some of the issues that you've run into?
Sure, no worries. So the forks have a large amount of compression dampening, but a very light fork spring involved. This is the original spring. It's this part here is quite soft. It's only about 3.1 newtons in the spring rate, which is most kids' 85 dirt bikes have around about that. And then it progresses up to about a 5.1. So it's very soft for what the bike's capable of, the weight of the bike and so forth. So what the factory have done is they've tried to make this on the gravel roads, it's nice and plush and comfy, little tiny bumps. Showroom stuff, it's awesome. But out in the trail, it's too soft to support the bike, so you bottom the fork.
Yep.
Now, so what the factory's done to try and control that when you're off-road is give it a lot of compression dampening. Now, when you have a fork that's a column of oil, when you try and compress it really fast, it can't compress. It's got to process the oil through the valves and ports. So if it can't do that, it goes solid. So hence why when you're riding in the bush and you hit a baby head or a boulder or something, you get a lot of deflection because the fork just can't cycle quick enough.
Yeah.
So we've dropped the compression right down out of the fork to give it something that's more in line with most other high performance bikes. And in turn, we've given it more spring. So a stiffer spring allows us to control the bottoming rate, control where we ride in the stroke, but then the softer compression allows the fork to actually absorb the bumps.
Yep, okay.
On the rebound leg, we've actually increased the rebound. There's not quite enough. And so this goes hand in hand with your busyness comment, where it deflects off things, but also feels like it's generally unstable, bounces around and you've got to really muscle it a lot.
Yeah.
The rebound is essentially, as the fork compresses, it's unloading too fast, pulling the front wheel off the ground, and then that creates a loss of traction.
Yeah.
So we've given a lot more compression in that regard. Rebound, sorry.
Yeah. I was saying, we were chatting earlier, just of how important dynos are, because you use basically the same settings from previous CFMOTOs, but then putting it in the dyno, it didn't work exactly how you want it to work.
Correct, that's right. Yeah, so I can show you that in a moment.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look at that in the dyno graph. And then we've got issues with the springs as well, because it's such a new bike, there just isn't anything out there at the moment.
Correct, yes. So the requirements of this bike is it's 41mm fork, so the spring is quite a small diameter, but it has 200mm travel. But it also needs quite a decent rate to hold the weight and what it's doing. So that's just not made yet. There was a bike early on in the 80s that had that available, but they no longer make them. So Rally Raid, which is a company that's quite synonymous with adventure bike stuff, about 6 weeks away, they'll have some drop-in springs available in multiple rates, which is fantastic. But for us, what we've had to do today is we've got a set of YSS springs from a TDM 850. Now, these are progressives. Now, progressives aren't my favourite choice.
Yeah, mentioned earlier.
Yep, but you can make them work if you know what you're doing with them. So, like I said, they're progressive, so the initial part's softer and it gets harder.
Yeah.
So we take consideration to oil height in the fork, so we can linear out a little bit. Also, how much preload we apply at the start as well. So we've come up with what we need, so we give you an average of about a 6 Newton, 6.2 Newton through the rate of travel.
And you said it's only really at the very end that it's hardening up. It's quite linear.
Yeah. So I've tested the spring rate. In my test, the most travel I can give is about 150mm.
Yeah.
And the initial part of the travel is, it runs at 5.2. Then in the meat part, it runs at 6.2.
Yep.
And the last bit of travel, 30 sort of mil, it goes up to about 7.
Okay.
So what I've done is, this is the original spring from YSS. The other one I've modified, I've slightly shortened it to increase this rate. So between the two, we're going to get what we need.
Yeah.
So you can see in the dyno graph, so this is a plot from the fork work we've done. Now the brown line here, the really high one at the top, this is showing our compression dampening. And so you can see it kicks up strong initially. That's to help your brake dive when you first grab the brake. But then it seems to ramp really fast and then keeps going sky high. Now it's pulling quite a high number, more than double than what we like to see. So that gives us that harshness and deflection off bumps. And then on the rebound, the original fork is this light green line. It's this one here. It's quite a low number. It doesn't give a lot of control. Now with the soft springs that were in originally, that's not so bad. But once you start going heavier springs to suit your weight, it loses control. So in comparison, the purple line here is what we've ended up with the compression. Is pretty much half where we were. And a rebound, we've got about a 20% gain or 30% gain, which is this black trace down here.
Yep, okay.
You can see, key point, why revalves are important. This part here, got less rebound than factory. So that gives us our sensitivity and field of traction. And then it gives us more for when you're coming out of a big whoop or G out, basically.
Yep, okay.
Cool. And then in the comparison with the rear shock, this is our plot for the rear shock. Now, this is the orange line is the original. So it has a lot of rebound. So the thing gets bogged in the bottom of the stroke all the time and feels harsh and feels dead. And then bugger all compression dampening. So what that translates to is the bike tends to blow through stroke quite easy, but then stays buried in the stroke.
Yep, okay.
And then the comparison is the green line's where we've gone to, far less rebound, bit more compression, all balanced.
Okay.
So in relation to the bike, we've got more less compression on the fork, more on the rear shock, so the bike's more balanced. Same with the rebound. We've got more rebound on the front, less on the back.
Yep.
It's going up and down even. Translate to more stability.
So Joe, how do you think the bike is going to be now? What do you think the biggest changes are going to be?
So the biggest thing you'll notice is a balance front to back. The bike's really going to, when you come off a water bar and land, when it comes back out of that, be even. Not going to push the front to a direction or anything like that, or the back will move around nice and solid. But also compliance. We're going to have more stability, but a lot more compliance with the bike, particularly in the front. It's probably the two biggest takeaways you'll find riding this bike.
Oh, I'm looking forward to riding this off-road because, as I said earlier, like the suspension was holding me back. It did feel a bit unbalanced. The actual, the side-to-side, the bike and how it handles is fantastic. They've got that perfect on this, but yeah, that did feel a bit soft in the front and was bottoming out. And a lot of people complaining about the rear being harsh as well.
Yes, correct.
How have you found, now it's all set up, how would it compare to, say, other bikes, adventure bikes?
Sure. So we look for certain numbers in our computers and dynos and so forth, and now this brings in line with what we do with aftermarket setups for Aprilia Tourags, your Teneres, or your sort of real hard-hitting mid-capacity adventure bikes. The numbers that we've got out of this are well and truly in line with that, so it should actually have a good performance value out of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, mate. How do people get hold of you if they want to get some work done?
Yep. Facebook, Instagram, we're on there, RideDynamics, also ridedynamics.com.au. Give me a call, or it's all on Google. Just track me down, and easiest is the phone. Call me on the phone.
All right. Too easy. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
If you haven't, make sure you click the subscribe button. There'll be plenty more content on the CFMOTO, including me sending it in the bush. All right. Catch us.
Nice. Cheers.